My son blocked me from Thanksgiving dinner. He said my presence would embarrass him and his wife. Dad, you're just a mechanic with dirty hands, he told me over the phone. I hung up, stared at my grease-stained fingers, and thought that was the end of it. But 3 days later, they called begging me to come help. And when I showed up with my toolbox, a man stepped out of a $300,000 Bentley and said something that changed everything. Before I tell you what that man said, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching this from. I love connecting with people from all over the world who understand what it's like to be underestimated. The wrench slipped from my oil-slicked fingers as the phone's shrill ring cut through the rumble of the Chevy's engine. I'd been elbow-deep in a transmission rebuild for the better part of 3 hours, and the last thing I needed was an interruption. But when I saw Austin's name flashing on the screen, I wiped my hands on an old shop rag and answered, "Hey son, what's up?" The silence stretched longer than it should have. I could hear Riley's voice in the background, sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. "Dad, we need to talk about Thursday." Thursday. Thanksgiving. The dinner I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Riley had insisted on hosting this year at their new place in Brookfield Heights, the kind of neighborhood where the mailboxes cost more than most people's monthly rent. Sure thing. What time should I be there? I can bring my famous stuffing, or maybe... Actually, Dad, that's what I'm calling about. Austin's voice had that careful tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news. The same tone he'd used when he told me he was switching majors from mechanical engineering to computer science. "We've decided it might be better if you didn't come this year." The garage suddenly felt colder. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor scattered with tools and parts. I set down the rag, my fingers still black with grease despite the wiping. "Come again. Look, Dad, Riley's got some important people coming. Colleagues from her venture capital firm, potential investors. It's a big opportunity for both of us." He paused, and I could almost see him running his hand through his hair the way he'd done as a kid when he was nervous. "The thing is, you're a mechanic, Dad. You've got grease under your fingernails, you smell like motor oil, and honestly, you'd embarrass us." The words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I'd raised this boy alone since he was 7 years old, after his mother decided being a mechanic's wife wasn't glamorous enough for her Instagram lifestyle. I'd worked double shifts to pay for his private school, sold my classic Mustang to cover his college tuition, and missed countless evenings with friends to help him with homework I barely understood. "Austin, I've been working with my hands for 40 years. These hands put food on your tableclothes on your back and paid for that fancy degree hanging on your wall. I know, Dad, and I'm grateful, but this is different. This is about our future. Riley's uncle might invest in our startup, but only if everything looks professional. Professional. As if 37 years of honest work of building engines that purr like kittens and fixing problems other mechanics couldn't solve wasn't professional enough. I thought about the photo on my workbench, Austin at his graduation, grinning in his cap and gown, while I stood beside him in my one good suit, the one I'd bought specifically for that day. He'd hugged me, then told me he couldn't have done it without me. That seemed like a lifetime ago. "So what you're saying is I'm good enough to fix your car when it breaks down, but not good enough to sit at your dinner table. Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be. It's just one Thanksgiving. We can do something together another time, just the family. Just the family." As if Riley's venture capitalist friends were more family than the man who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. "Fine." The word came out rougher than I intended. "You do what you think is best." "Dad, I hung up before he could finish. The garage fell silent except for the tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of traffic on Route 9. I stood there for a long moment, staring at my hands, these weathered, capable hands that had built and fixed and created for 4 decades. The same hands that had changed Austin's diapers, taught him to ride a bike, and applauded at every little league game. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an embarrassment, a relic from a world where hard work and honest sweat still meant something. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd spend Thanksgiving alone, maybe watch some football, maybe not. But 3 days later, my phone rang again. Friday morning, 7 a.m. sharp, and my phone was screaming from the nightstand. I'd been up until 2 nursing a beer and trying to forget Austin's rejection. Now I was fumbling for the damn thing in my boxers and yesterday's t-shirt. "Dad," Austin's voice crackled through high-pitched and frantic. "Dad, we've got a serious problem." I rubbed my eyes, squinting at weak November sunlight through my kitchen blinds. "What's wrong?" "The BMW. It's completely dead. Won't start, won't turn over, nothing. Riley's got 3 major client meetings today, and I've got that investor presentation at noon. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days ago, I wasn't good enough for their dinner table. Now they needed me. Did you try jumping it? Dad, I'm not an idiot. We tried everything. Called AOA. They towed it to the BMW dealership. His voice cracked like he was 16 again. They want $3,000. 3,000 for some computer thing and transmission work. I poured yesterday's coffee, black and bitter as my mood. That's rough, son. Dad, we don't have that kind of money right now. Not with the startup costs and the house payment. Desperation bled through the phone. Riley's freaking out. She's got that big Hartwell Industries presentation, and if she misses it, maybe you should call a real mechanic. I said, letting the words hang. The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Dad, please. I know things are weird between us, but you're the only person who can fix this. You've always been able to fix everything. His voice dropped to a whisper. We can't afford a real mechanic right now. A real mechanic. As if I was some amateur playing with toys. I thought about hanging up. Thought about telling him to figure it out himself, the way I'd figured out how to raise a kid alone, pay bills, when work was slow, swallow my pride when life got hard. But this was Austin, my boy. The kid I'd taught to change oil at 12, who used to hand me wrenches and ask a million questions about engines. Before college taught him his old man's knowledge wasn't worth much. What's wrong with it? Relief flooded his voice. The dealer said something about the transmission control module and fuel pump. Technical terms I didn't understand. Technical terms he didn't understand. The same kid who used to recite engine specs like baseball statistics. All right, I'll be there in an hour. Dad, thank you. I mean it. You're saving our lives here. Saving their lives with the same hands that would have embarrassed them at dinner. I hung up and grabbed my coffee keys and the toolbox that had been my constant companion for 4 decades. The same toolbox Austin used to dig through as a kid, fascinated by every socket and wrench. The irony tasted worse than stale coffee. So there I was driving my beat-up pickup toward their fancy neighborhood, wondering how the hands that were too dirty for Thanksgiving dinner were suddenly clean enough to save their expensive car. Brookfield Heights hit me like a slap with a silk glove. Every lawn looked like a golf course, every driveway a car showroom. My '98 Ford pickup coughed past houses that cost more than I'd made in a decade drawing stares from joggers in designer athletic wear. Austin and Riley's place sat at the end of Maple Ridge Court, like something from a magazine fake column's oversized windows, the kind of house that screamed money. I pulled into their circular driveway, my truck looking like a stray dog at a dog show. Through the bay window next door, Mrs. Vivian Thornton peered through her blinds. I'd bet she was already calling the homeowners association about the eyesore in her perfect neighborhood. Austin emerged before I'd cut the engine, dressed in khakis and polo like he was heading to the country club. Riley appeared behind him, blonde hair pulled back in that effortless way that probably took an hour checking her Apple Watch constantly. Dad, thank God you're here. Austin's smile looked painted on. The car's in the garage. Riley managed a tight nod. Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. Mr. Foster, like I was hired help instead of the man who'd raised her husband. The garage was bigger than my house, with space for 4 cars and a workshop that had never seen real work. The BMW sat like a wounded animal hood already open. I grabbed my toolbox, ignoring how Riley stepped back, like grease might be contagious. What exactly happened? It just died? Austin said, hovering behind me. Yesterday afternoon, Riley was leaving for work, and it just stopped. I leaned over the engine bay, running my hands along wiring harnesses, checking connections. Beautiful machine, all German engineering, but beauty meant nothing when the computer brain took a vacation. Could be the transmission control module, I muttered. Or the fuel pump relay, maybe both. I traced electrical connections, feeling for loose wires, checking for corrosion. Riley shifted nervously. How long will it take? I straightened up, wiping my hands on my shop rag. This isn't a 15-minute fix. Computer diagnostics, possibly pulling the transmission pan, maybe dropping the fuel tank. 6-7 hours minimum. Austin's face went white. 6 hours, Dad. Riley's presentation is at 2. Then you better hope it's just a relay. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was in their spotless garage that had never seen real work, using skills they'd called embarrassing to save their upscale lifestyle. The same hands too dirty for their dinner table were now their only salvation. I was so focused on tracing the fuel line that I barely heard the car door slam. But when I looked up from under that hood, I saw a man in $1,000 suit walking toward us, and Austin's face went white as a sheet. The Bentley's door closed with the kind of solid thunk that only comes from German engineering and a six-figure price tag. The man who stepped out looked like he'd walked off the cover of Forbes' silver hair, perfectly styled charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck, and the kind of confident stride that said he owned whatever room he entered. Austin practically jogged over to meet him, his earlier panic replaced by the desperate enthusiasm of a salesman who just spotted his biggest prospect. "Uncle Benjamin." "What a surprise. We weren't expecting you until next week." Uncle Benjamin, Riley's uncle, the one Austin had mentioned during that phone call 3 days ago, the potential investor who might fund their startup dreams. Benjamin, darling." Riley appeared at Austin's side, her earlier stress evaporating into a practiced smile. "I thought you were still in Chicago. Wrapped up early." Benjamin Ashworth's voice carried the kind of authority that came from decades of making million-dollar decisions. "Thought I'd stop by, see how my favorite niece was settling into married life." His eyes swept over the scene, the pristine garage, the disabled BMW, and me still bent over the engine bay with grease on my hands and tools scattered around my feet. "Car trouble?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Riley laughed, a sound as artificial as the sweetener in diet soda. "Oh, just a little hiccup. We called our handyman to take a look." Handyman. 3 days ago I was too embarrassing to share their dinner table. Now I was their handyman. Austin jumped in, clearly eager to steer the conversation away from their automotive emergency. "Uncle Benjamin, you should see the business plan we've been working on. The market projections alone." "In a moment." Benjamin held up a hand, his attention fixed on me. "Mind if I take a look?" Before Austin could object, Benjamin walked over to where I was working. He moved with the careful precision of someone who knew his way around expensive machinery, stopping just close enough to observe without getting in the way. I continued my diagnosis, checking the fuel pressure regulator, testing electrical connections. Most people would see a guy in coveralls and assume I was just throwing parts at the problem until something stuck. But Benjamin Ashworth wasn't most people. "Transmission control module?" he asked, watching me trace the wiring harness. I glanced up, surprised. "Could be. Or the fuel pump relay. Won't know for sure until I run a full diagnostic." "What's your gut telling you?" I paused, studying his face. This wasn't small talk. He genuinely wanted to know. "Fuel pump's running, so probably not that. My money's on the TCM or a bad connection in the valve body wiring." Benjamin nodded slowly, his eyes following my methodical approach to the problem, while Austin and Riley stood frozen by the garage entrance, probably wondering why their potential investor was more interested in their broken car than their business proposal. Benjamin crouched down beside me. "You've worked on these before." "Few times. German engineering's solid, but when the computers go bad, it gets expensive fast." "Indeed it does." He watched as I carefully removed the transmission pan, noting how I organized each bolt, how I handled the delicate electronic components. "Most shops would have already started throwing parts at this." "Most shops get paid by the hour," I said, not looking up from my work. "I prefer to fix it right the first time." Something shifted in Benjamin's expression, a spark of recognition, like he'd just solved a puzzle he'd been working on for years. "Most people see a guy in dirty coveralls and assume he's just another grease monkey. But Benjamin Ashworth wasn't most people. He knew quality when he saw it, and something about my technique made him step closer." Benjamin rolled up his sleeves, actual Italian silk sleeves, and leaned in closer to examine my work. "You've got a systematic approach," he observed, watching me methodically test each connection. "Most mechanics I know would have started swapping parts by now. Waste of time and money," I said, carefully probing the transmission control module's wiring. "These German cars talk to you if you know how to listen." Interesting philosophy. He studied the way I handled the delicate electronic components, how I traced each wire with the patience of a surgeon. "You do restoration work?" I glanced up from the engine bay. "Used to. Not much call for it these days." "What kind of cars?" "Classics mostly. Muscle cars from the 60s and 70s. Some European stuff." I went back to my diagnostic, but Benjamin wasn't done with his questions. "Ever work on a Shelby Cobra?" My hands stilled on the wiring harness. "Once, long time ago." Benjamin's voice took on a different quality, like he was describing a religious experience. "I own a 1965 Cobra. Most perfect restoration I've ever seen. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every detail authentic, every component rebuilt to factory specifications, but somehow better than original. I kept my eyes on the engine, but I could feel my pulse quickening. Sounds like a beautiful car. It is. Cost me $2.5 million at auction, but it was worth every penny. The work was so precise, so artistic. I've been trying to find the craftsman who restored it for years. Want to commission him for my entire collection. The garage fell quiet, except for the soft hum of the Bentley's cooling engine. Austin and Riley exchanged nervous glances, probably wondering why their potential investor was more interested in old cars than their startup pitch. What color was it? I asked quietly. Benjamin's eyes sharpened. Guardsman blue with white racing stripes. Original 427 side oiler, completely rebuilt. Even had the correct date codes on the spark plug wires. I straightened up, slowly wiping my hands on the shop rag. Shelby American serial number CSX. The color drained from Benjamin's face. How could you possibly know that? Because I spent 8 months of my life bringing that car back from the dead. Found it in a barn in Wisconsin, more rust than metal. Had to fabricate half the body panels by hand. Benjamin stared at me like he'd just seen a ghost walk through the garage door. That's impossible. You're Joe Foster. Used to run Foster's Classic Restoration on Industrial Boulevard. I managed a small smile. Sold the shop 5 years ago to pay for my son's college tuition. My God? Benjamin's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You're him. You're the master who restored my Cobra. His eyes went wide as the full impact hit him. I paid $2.5 million for that car because of your work. Austin's jaw dropped so far I thought it might hit the concrete floor. Riley's perfectly composed expression cracked like ice in warm water, her face cycling through confusion, shock, and something that might have been panic. Benjamin looked back and forth between me and them pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Wait a minute. You're related to these two? The silence that followed was deafening. Austin and Riley stood there like deer in headlights, probably wondering how their embarrassing mechanic had just become worth $2.5 million. But Benjamin wasn't done with his questions. Benjamin shook his head in amazement. Foster's Classic Restoration. You had quite a reputation among collectors. He glanced around the garage. So what brings the legendary Joe Foster to fix BMWs in suburban driveways? I felt Austin and Riley's panic radiating heat. Just helping out family. Family? Benjamin's expression softened. Nothing more important, especially during holidays. He looked directly at me with genuine curiosity. Say, Joe, I didn't see you at Thanksgiving dinner here. If Austin's your son, surely you must have been there. The garage went dead silent. Austin cleared his throat nervously. Riley suddenly found her phone fascinating. Actually, I spent it at home. Watched some football. Benjamin's brow furrowed deeply. At home? But that doesn't make sense. He looked between Austin and Riley, confusion growing. Why wouldn't you invite your own father? Austin jumped in, voice pitched unnaturally high. Well, we had a very specific guest list. Business associates, you know how it is. Business associates. Benjamin repeated slowly, his tone sharpening. More important than family. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Riley's face went pale beneath her makeup. Austin looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete. There was a situation, Riley managed weakly. What kind of situation? Benjamin's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to getting straight answers. I could have let them squirm, watched them try to spin their way out. But I was tired of the games, tired of pretending their rejection hadn't cut deep. They didn't want me there, I said simply. Thought I'd embarrass them in front of Riley's colleagues. Benjamin went very still. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Austin's face flushed red. Dad, that's exactly how it was. I met his eyes steadily. Your exact words were that I was just a mechanic with dirty hands and I'd make you look bad. Benjamin's expression shifted from confusion to something much darker. Let me understand this correctly. His voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You excluded your own father, a master craftsman whose work I treasure, above almost any possession from your family dinner, because you were embarrassed by him. Uncle Benjamin, you don't understand the full situation, Riley started desperately. Oh, I understand perfectly. Benjamin's composure cracked like ice under pressure. You thought Joe Foster, the man whose artistry created a $2.5 million masterpiece, wasn't good enough for your dinner table. The weight of their hypocrisy hung in the air like smoke. Benjamin looked at them with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for children who'd broken something precious and irreplaceable. I'd seen a lot of things in my 62 years, but I'd never seen a man's face change the way Benjamin Ashworth's did in that moment. The disappointment in his eyes wasn't directed at me. Benjamin's anger erupted like a dam bursting. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice carried across the garage with the force of a man who'd built an empire on recognizing value. "Any idea at all?" Austin and Riley stood frozen, probably realizing their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. "Joe Foster isn't just some mechanic you call when your expensive toy breaks down." Benjamin's words cut through the air like a blade. "He's an artist. A master craftsman whose work belongs in museums? That Cobra restoration? It's not just a car, it's a masterpiece." Through the bay window, I caught sight of Mrs. Vivian Thornton pressed against her glass, probably getting the show of her lifetime for the neighborhood gossip network. "Uncle Benjamin, please, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." Riley tried desperately. "Bigger than it needs to be." Benjamin whirled on her. "Your husband excluded a man whose single piece of work is worth more than your house, your cars, and your precious startup combined, because he was embarrassed by honest work." Austin's face went white as fresh paint. "We didn't know." "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask." Benjamin's voice rose to a roar. "You looked at your father's hands and saw dirt instead of artistry. You saw shame instead of skill that takes decades to master." The garage fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and Mrs. Thornton's air conditioning unit kicking on. Benjamin pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with decisive precision. "Riley, I'm withdrawing my investment offer, effective immediately." Riley's knees nearly buckled. "Uncle Benjamin, no. Please. We can explain what that you're too shallow to recognize talent when it's sitting at your own dinner table." He didn't even look up from his phone. "I don't invest in people who lack basic judgment." Austin stepped forward, desperation bleeding through his voice. "Sir, with all due respect, this is a family matter. It shouldn't affect business." "Everything affects business, son, character most of all." Benjamin finished whatever he was typing and looked up. "I've spent 40 years building my company on one principle: surround yourself with the best people you can find. People who understand quality, who respect craftsmanship, who know the difference between surface shine and real substance." He gestured toward me. "Joe Foster represents everything I value in a business partner: precision, dedication, integrity. You represent everything I avoid: people who judge worth by appearances instead of results." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Austin looked like he might be sick. Riley's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Benjamin turned to me, his expression softening. "Joe, I'd like to offer you an exclusive restoration contract. My entire collection, 12 classic cars with more acquisitions planned. 500,000 annually, plus materials and bonuses for exceptional work." Austin's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might hit the concrete. $500,000. More than his startup had projected in revenue for their first 3 years. "I don't invest in people who can't recognize the treasure in their own family." Benjamin said his words carrying the weight of final judgment. But Benjamin wasn't finished. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years: respect, and said words that would change everything I thought I knew about my past. Benjamin reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. "Before you answer, Joe, there's something else you need to know." Austin and Riley watched in stunned silence as Benjamin opened the envelope and spread several papers across the BMW's hood. 3 years ago, I started searching for the craftsman who restored my Cobra. I hired private investigators, contacted auction houses, tracked down every lead. Benjamin's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. The trail led me to Industrial Boulevard, to a shop called Foster's Classic Restoration. My heart stopped. That was my place. "I know." Benjamin pulled out a photograph, my old shop, the sign I'd painted myself hanging over the bay doors. By the time I found it, the new owner told me the previous proprietor had sold out, needed money for his son's education. The garage went deadly quiet. Austin's face drained of all color as the implications hit him. "I bought it back, Joe." Benjamin's words fell like stones into still water. "Paid 3 times what it was worth, but I didn't care. I've been looking for you for 3 years. I stared at the photograph, memories flooding back. The early mornings, the late nights, the satisfaction of bringing dead metal back to life. The day I signed those papers, watching everything I'd built disappear so Austin could have his computer science degree. You, you own my old shop? We do. Benjamin smiled, pulling out another document. I had the lawyers draw up partnership papers. 50-50 ownership. Foster and Ashworth Classic Restoration. He paused, his voice softening. I figured you might want your name back on the door. Austin made a sound like he'd been punched in the gut. Dad, you never told me. You never asked. The words came out harder than I intended. You were too busy being embarrassed by what I did to care about what it cost me. Riley's voice was barely a whisper. You sold your business for Austin's college. Every bolt, every tool, every dream I had. I looked at my son, seeing him clearly for maybe the first time in years. I wanted you to have opportunities I never had. Figured a degree was worth more than an old man's garage. Benjamin spread out blueprints on the hood. The shop's been sitting empty since I bought it, waiting for the right partner. He looked at me with something approaching reverence. I don't want to hire you, Joe. I want to work with you. Build something together. Austin stepped forward, his voice breaking. Dad, I had no idea. I never knew you sacrificed. You weren't supposed to know. I picked up the partnership papers, my hands trembling slightly. I wanted you to make your own way, not feel guilty about mine. Benjamin watched the exchange with the patience of a man who understood the weight of family dynamics. The offer stands, Joe. Your garage, your name on the door, your rules. I just want to learn from the best. I looked at the papers, at the photograph of my old shop, at my son's stricken face. For 3 years, I'd told myself selling the garage was worth it if Austin succeeded. Now I realized success meant more than just money or status. Partnership, I said finally, not employment. Benjamin's smile could have powered the neighborhood. Partnership. 6 months later, I stood in the same garage where this story began, but everything had changed. The sign outside no longer read Foster's Classic Restoration. It read Foster and Ashworth Master Craftsman. The transformation was remarkable. High-end clients drove from 3 states away to have their classics restored at Foster and Ashworth. Ferraris, Porsches, vintage Mustangs cars worth more than most people's houses filled our bays. Benjamin and I worked side by side, 2 craftsmen who understood that perfection wasn't just a goal, it was a standard. My hands, once deemed too dirty for family dinners, now commanded respect from collectors who paid premium prices for our artistry. The same fingers that Austin had called embarrassing were featured in classic car magazine's cover story, the masters behind million-dollar restorations. Austin and Riley's startup had collapsed within months of losing Benjamin's backing. Without the investment, they couldn't maintain their lifestyle. The McMansion went up for sale, replaced by a modest apartment in a neighborhood where my pickup truck wouldn't stand out. Austin took a job at a tech company, swallowing his entrepreneurial pride for a steady paycheck. They came by the shop on a Tuesday afternoon in March, both of them looking humbled by circumstances I wouldn't have wished on anyone, even after everything that had happened. Dad, Austin said, standing awkwardly by the entrance while I worked on a 1967 Camaro SS, we were hoping we could talk. I didn't stop working, but I listened. We know we messed up, Riley added, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We were wrong about everything. I straightened up, wiping my hands on a shop rag, a gesture that once made them cringe. What do you want, Austin? We want our family back, he said simply. We want to make things right. I studied my son's face, seeing something there I hadn't noticed in years. Genuine remorse mixed with hard-earned wisdom. You can start by understanding something, I said. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about respect. You don't get to treat people like garbage and then expect them to welcome you back when it's convenient. Austin nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I know. I understand that now. What you did for me selling the shop for my education, I never knew. I never appreciated it. You never asked, I said, but without the anger that used to accompany those words. I'm asking now, he said. I'm asking about everything. Your work, your sacrifices, your dreams. I want to learn who my father really is, not who I thought he should be. Benjamin emerged from the office, nodding politely at Austin and Riley before giving me a questioning look. I gave him a small nod. Everything was fine. Here's how this works, I told Austin. You want a relationship with me, you earn it. You show up, you listen, you respect what I do and who I am. No conditions, no embarrassment, no apologies for my profession. Yes, sir, Austin said, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the boy I'd raised. Riley stepped forward. Mr. Foster Joe, I owe you an apology. We both do. We were wrong to judge you wrong, to exclude you wrong about everything that matters. I looked at them both, these two people who'd caused me so much pain, and realized something had shifted. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but possibility. The possibility that family could be rebuilt on better foundations. We'll see, I said. Actions matter more than words. As they left, I returned to the Camaro, my hands steady and sure. Sometimes the people who call you embarrassing are just embarrassed by their own inability to see your worth. Don't let anyone dim your light, especially family who should be holding the torch. Looking back at my story now, I realize how close I came to losing everything that truly mattered. For years, I let other people's opinions define my worth, even when those people were my own family. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't wait for others to validate what God has already placed in your hands. The truth is, we all have gifts that the world needs. Mine happen to be working with engines, but yours might be teaching, cooking, writing, or simply listening to people who need to be heard. Whatever it is, don't let anyone convince you it's not valuable enough. God doesn't make mistakes when he distributes talents, and he certainly didn't make one with you. This true story taught me that respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you command through excellence and integrity. When Benjamin recognized my work, it wasn't because I changed who I was. It was because I never stopped being excellent at what God called me to do, even when my own son couldn't see it. These grandpa stories we tell aren't just entertainment. They're warnings and wisdom wrapped in real experiences. My true story could have ended with me bitter and alone watching football every Thanksgiving for the rest of my life. Instead, it became a testament to the power of staying true to your craft and your character. The biggest lesson. Sometimes the people closest to you will be the last to recognize your worth. That's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their vision. Don't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's narrow definition of success. I spent decades being the family's reliable fix-it man, never asking for recognition. But there's a difference between being useful and being valued. Learn that difference before it costs you what it almost cost me. Like all meaningful grandpa stories, this one carries a simple truth. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. These grandpa stories remind us that it's never too late to reclaim what's rightfully ours, to set boundaries, and to demand the respect we've always deserved. If this true story touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear about a time when someone underestimated you. Drop a comment below and share your own experience. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us all of our inherent worth.